You are listening to Inside the Notes. I'm your host, Erica Block. Here we have the opportunity to listen to the stories that connect our musical family tree. First-hand accounts of performances, musicians, and mentors that shape the way we listen, learn, and teach. On today's episode, we're chatting with Weston Sprott, trombonist of the Met Opera Orchestra and Dean of the Prep Division at the Juilliard School. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. How you doing?
Great. I'd love to start off talking just about the simple fact of when you think you might have fallen in love with music. Was it a concert or a moment or just the accumulation of spending time in band? What was that beginning for you?
I started to play the trombone in the 6th grade because that's the way we do things in Texas. So around the end of your 5th grade year, some representatives from the junior high school come to your school and tell you that you have a choice between 2 or 3 different extracurricular activities. You can be in the chorus, you can be in the band, you can be in the orchestra, whatever number of things it was. And my dad was a trombone player when he was in junior high. I think he quit in 9th grade. And so I thought, okay, I think I want to be in the band. And I'd grown up going to high school football games all the time because that's another big Texas thing. And we enjoyed seeing these charismatic show bands, and we always sat in the stands near the band. So being in the band always seemed kind of a cool thing. And the music programs in Texas are enormous. So we definitely didn't have that dynamic of being a band geek. Band was something that a lot of people were in, and there was a huge community there. So I tried out on trombone, trumpet, and saxophone. Those are the little trials that I did. And I gravitated towards the trombone. And I would say I fell in love with it right from the start. This wasn't something that occurred over many, many years. Of course, when I first started, I had no idea that it was something that could be a career. But as far as being in love with the concept and the feeling of creating sound, and having that vibration running through your body and right next to your ear, that was always something that I enjoyed right from the beginning. So my parents never required or even really encouraged me to practice. It was just something that I enjoyed doing. I could never get enough of it. So I practiced all the time. Never really took lessons either, and not consistently until after I graduated high school was the first time I started taking regular private lessons. So, I got a lot of my training or development just from practicing a lot and listening to whatever the band director had to say in that 1-hour band class that I had, or whatever little snippets of information I could pick up during a sectional or a marching band rehearsal that I thought would help me. And just by listening a lot to other players I thought were good, going to Blockbuster Music, which isn't even a thing anymore, and picking up a CD here or there and hearing what a good trombone player sounds like. And it wasn't until my junior year of high school that I fell in love with music in the sense that I thought, oh, this is perhaps a career choice. That's when that light bulb kind of went off, because that was the first year that I made the Texas All-State Band. And suddenly I was amongst this community of other kids my age, a large community of kids my age who were taking the craft really seriously, were really excited about it. You got to play in bigger concerts and be a part of a kind of this more, just more excited community. And near the end of that school year, which would have been spring of 1999, for me, I went to my first ever professional orchestra concert.
Wow, what was that?
Yeah, and it's kind of prophetic in a way. It was the season finale concert of the Houston Symphony with Eschenbach conducting, and it was Mahler 3.
Oh my
which,
God.
as people who know music know, that's basically the biggest trombone solo in all of the orchestral repertoire, and it would be a solo that you have to play in basically every major orchestral audition. And actually, fast forwarding 5 years or 6 years from that point, fast forwarding 6 years from that point, I think it's actually the excerpt that I played the best in the last round of the Met audition that probably helped secure the job for me. But that was the first professional orchestra concert I ever heard.
Wow.
And I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I just had heard the symphony's playing this really cool piece, and it's got big brass parts, and there's a cool trombone solo or something. If you're going to go to a concert, probably check that one out. So I asked my dad if we could go. We got tickets. We went. And that was one of those moments where the light bulb goes off. It's like, ping, this is cool. I want to do that. That looks awesome. If I could do this all the time, I'd be happy. Let's start charging up the mountain. And so from that point, I was pretty mentally locked in on
Yeah.
doing this thing. I had a very clear vision of I want to be an orchestral trombonist from that was age 16.
Wow, that's awesome. So, what an awesome piece to have be that moment piece. So, from there, how did you begin treading through the water of like, okay, so what are the colleges? Do I have to find a teacher? Did you have anybody who started like saying, try this path, or did you just kind of go out there and start hunting?
It was really my whole college trajectory was luck in a way. I didn't have clear guidance in that way. It's
Hmm.
not like I was working with a private lesson teacher every single week who was
Hmm.
saying you should consider this teacher and this teacher and this teacher in these particular schools because they're going to help you do this or
Right.
whatever. I was working with a lack of information, and I was also growing up in a household where my parents didn't know much about the idea of becoming a professional musician either. And
Hmm.
they were looking for me to pursue the paths that were more traditionally secure and
Yeah.
guaranteed. So Weston should go to business school or pre-med or do political science or engineering and then go to law school or something that's quote unquote practical.
Yeah.
Um, so I ended up figuring out what colleges I was going to audition for by looking at U.S. News and World Report and looking down the list of best music schools and then simultaneously down the list of best business schools. And so I ended up applying really only to Indiana and Michigan because they were the two schools that had top 10 programs in both of those categories. And I think I sent a tape to University of Maryland and a couple of in-state schools, but
Hmm.
for all intents and purposes, Michigan and Indiana were the two that I was kind of seriously gunning for, and for those reasons,
Right.
not because I knew a whole lot about the teacher or
Right.
because I knew about the music program that much, just because this magazine says those things are good and it checks both of these boxes. So off we go, see what happens. And then my parents would feel good about me going to a place where I could potentially have a backup plan.
Right.
So that's how that got started. And I went to Indiana University for 2 years. And the story of transferring to Curtis, which I did after 2 years, because I did 2 years at IU and then 3 years at Curtis, was also just a very organic thing. We had this this particular segment. There's the International Trombone Association, the ITA, and
Hmm.
there was a little wing of it or something called the IUITA. So like a little area at Indiana University that was our own little department of it or something, and we'd all pay $20 a year to be a part of it. And basically, what would happen is you have a pizza party or two, and then you get to everyone hop in a couple of vans and go to a concert somewhere outside of Bloomington as the events of that organization. And so somewhere around the second year, in the first semester of my second year at IU, the trip was that we were all going to drive to Chicago and see the Philadelphia Orchestra play on tour at Chicago Symphony Hall.
Hmm.
And I remember they played Enigma Variations, and that was the first with Zavalish on that tour. And that was the first time I had heard like one of the big, big world class orchestras play, you know, and it was just fascinating. You know, I, and I remember, in fact, some of my classmates, because we went there as like 40 trombone players. you know,
Awesome.
we had like, because IU has a huge studio, so we probably packed 4 15-passenger vans or something. We all
God.
drove to Chicago and got pizza and went to the concert. And I remember some of my older colleagues in the trombone section or in the trombone department kind of making fun of me about how into it I was.
Hmm.
They're like, man, you're like sitting on the edge of your seat the whole time, and you're paying attention to which side the person empties their spit valve on, if they're doing it on the left or the right, or which hand they're using to put their mute in, and things. I was just so into it, And it didn't occur to me until a couple of months later that I should audition for Curtis, and that if I auditioned for Curtis, that I would get a chance to see the Philadelphia Orchestra play every single week, and that I would get a chance to study with those people every single week.
Hmm.
It just so turned out that at that time, the entire trombone section, minus one person, so 3 out of the 4 players in the trombone section at Curtis, were all from Texas.
Wow.
A lot of us had done all-state band and stuff like that together. So at the time, we would chat with each other every once in a while on AOL Instant Messenger,
Yes.
back when that was a thing. And they were like, Curtis is amazing and it's the best school and this and that. And I was like, okay, sure, whatever. And I didn't really think about it until one day I was at home over Christmas break. And I just had an epiphany. I just woke
Hmm.
up one morning and went, oh my God, I should be auditioning for Curtis. I should do that. But this was like December 28th or something, right?
Right.
Um, and then I go and look at Curtis's website, and you have to be under 21 to audition at the time. That's
Yeah.
since changed, but at the time you had to be under 21. And I knew who was graduating and who was not graduating and how often there were going to be openings. And it just dawned on me. It's like, if I ever want to go to Curtis, the only chance I have to audition is this year. If I don't go this year, I'm never going. So I should at least try. And I called the school, and of course, I get the answering machine or something because it's the middle of the holidays. And so as soon as they reopen on January 5th, whatever it is, I call again and said, I'd really like to audition. They said, the application deadline was December 1st. You're a month and you're 5, 6 weeks late, dude. Like, no. And it's like, but you don't understand. I'm serious. I really want to audition. I'm a good player. I think I could do it. They're like, no. And I said, well, can you just ask the teachers directly if they would be willing to make an exception for me? I really gave them a hard time about it. And eventually they caved and said, fine, if you really want to audition, you come audition. And so I emptied what little bit of my money I had in my bank account from playing a couple of gigs here and there in Bloomington to fly out to Philadelphia, get a hotel and a taxi and stuff like that. And I auditioned and got the spot. And then I transferred and went to Curtis for the last 3 years. So,
That's awesome.
it's not a traditional story of how you navigate your way through college, but it's my story. So
I love it because it was so self-motivated. You chose each level and you were completely self-motivated to go, I'm loving it. I'm going to go for more. I'm loving it. I'm going to go for more. And if you hadn't harassed the secretary, you might never have gone. And, there's an element to like in this choose your own adventure path, you have to fight if you want to
yeah,
do it. Like you have to say, no, I'm serious. I really want to go. So
yeah.
that's awesome. So it sounds like IU was a great introduction into the universe since you were so fresh into what exactly this was when you were in high school. So when you got to Curtis, was it like another level of having your mind be blown, or were you in full like, yeah, these are my people. I'm doing this now?
It's totally different. IU and Curtis are both phenomenal schools, and they just provided something very different. So I think there are multiple things that I gained at IU. One is that IU is if it's either the biggest or one of the top 2 or 3 largest just by sheer population music schools in the country.
Yeah.
So as someone who was coming from a place where I didn't have a huge community of professional trombone players that I was working with or other people who were taking the craft as seriously as I did. There were a couple because I was in high school with Tim Higgins, who's the principal trombonist of the San Francisco Symphony. We graduated together. We sat first and second chair in band and stuff like that. So I mean, I knew what good was, but
Yeah.
I didn't know how that transferred on a national level.
Right.
I knew I was good in my little pod,
Hmm.
Um, and so when you go to Indiana, suddenly you're in a studio or a combination of 3 trombone studios where there's 50, 60 trombone players from all over the country, all over the world, in fact, and you get a good feeling for where do I stand in this hierarchy or what does it take to be competitive in a broader sense.
Yeah.
In IU, we had blind auditions for ensemble placements at the beginning of every semester. So right away, you get a feeling this is where I am in the pecking order, or this is what it takes to achieve. So it was incredibly valuable for that. It was incredibly valuable because I had a great private lesson teacher, Carl Lindy, he was the first teacher I'd worked with who was like, oh, this is a really high level professional musician who knows the standard, who has done the things that I want to do, and someone who, as much as you can be an arrogant little 17-year-old who thinks you know everything, can basically cut you down to size in all of 12 seconds at every lesson. And also in just the nicest, most beautiful ways, because he's like a very warm and kind-hearted person. But when someone operates at that level of intellect and musicianship, the disparity is so great between someone like that and someone like me when I was 17 years old that you
Right.
can't help but recognize it. And
Right.
so that was super beneficial. And then also just having the college experience, because IU is a Big Ten university. I went to basketball games and football games and the student union and got to go to lots of concerts and living in a dorm. Those are things that at the time that Curtis could not provide.
Yeah, absolutely.
Granted, when I was graduating high school, I wasn't even aware that Curtis was a thing. But I'm glad that I went to IU because of that combination of experiences.
Hmm.
And then by the time I left IU, and it's worth noting that Curtis is the only place I auditioned to transfer. It's not like I was looking to get out. I just recognized that Curtis was a special opportunity and I should try to take advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
When I got there, what Curtis provided was that it actually was not a directly competitive environment. Actually, Curtis never did internal auditions for placements. It was all done on seniority. Like, when you come in as a first year, you're playing assistant or not playing in the orchestra. Most of the time, the people who have been there longer get the better parts, and that's okay. But what it did provide is that I got to see the Philadelphia Orchestra every single week. Over the course of 3 years, I missed 3 subscription concerts. I was there like clockwork. And also you got to work with teachers who were more active in the profession, who were currently doing it. And so it just created this kind of tactile connection to what it is that you wanted to do. So I knew that I wanted to be an orchestral player at the highest level. And every week I was able to look at players who were in their prime, because, I'm studying with Nitzan Horowitz, who's the principal trombonist of the Philadelphia Orchestra. And at the time, he's in his mid-30s or something. So this is someone who's still like mid-career at the absolute peak of his strengths, and has been recently winning auditions. He's not too far away from it, that type of thing.
Yeah.
You're able to go to concerts every week and say, if I want to do this, I need to sound like that.
Yeah.
There it is, exactly right there. And what's required is never distant, because there's not enough time to forget what the standard is like before you hear it again and again and again and again. And so this total immersion thing that happens over the course of a few years at a place like that is really powerful.
Absolutely. I think for me, I had the same experience in Boston, and that was the single most important part of my whole time, I think, in that city, was every week, multiple times a week, hearing them. And in that, I found the level is so high, but then you would have this moment where the bar was raised again, or another soloist comes in, or a different conductor comes in, and the bar is raised yet again, to the point where you're like, there's no way it could get any better than this. And
Right.
then you're surprised again. Can you think of a moment or two in your time listening to them where just something sticks out of like, man, that concert, that was it. That was incredible.
There were several. I'll tell you a few of them that come to mind. I remember Zavalish's last concert with Philadelphia Orchestra. They did Beethoven 9. And it was just, there was a real love affair between the Philadelphia Orchestra and Zavalish.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of music directors who come and go, and some overstay their welcome. And by the time they leave, everyone's ready for them to be done. It's kind of a good riddance, whatever, or yeah, he was fine. We're excited about the next person. But with Zavalish, there was this really deep level of respect and just love for what this person had brought to the institution, and the level of detail in which he prepared everything. And that performance was just absolutely elevational. It was just through the roof. And the curtain calls for him seemed eternal. Mm-hmm. And when you went backstage, or when I went backstage, because I had kind of gotten this habit after you've been in school for a while, a lot of the musicians, you go backstage and say congratulations and great job, enjoy the concert, whatever. So many people backstage were in tears, which was just a unique thing to see so many people that you idolize kind of in tears about. That was perhaps the last time we're going to play a concert with this person, and what a great era that we had. This was just amazing. And it's not even that Beethoven 9 is one of the great trombone parts, because it's not. I mean, it's a difficult one, but it's not one of our absolute highlights, I don't think. But just the totality of what that piece meant at that moment in time for that institution was truly powerful. Another that I remember was Brahms 2 with Simon Rattle and the Philadelphia Orchestra, because that is a very demanding trombone part. Mm-hmm. And not only Rattle just brings a great energy to an orchestra, like everything is sweeter, or everything is more exciting. It's really powerful. There are only a handful of conductors who their presence just completely reshapes the orchestra almost instantaneously, and he's one of those people. And that performance was just through the roof elevational for so many reasons. But also, I remember so well how well Nitzan played that part. And that's a very difficult trombone excerpt. Any trombonist will tell you that's one of the ones that you think about. It keeps you up. And I remember leaving that concert at 10 o'clock that night, just thinking to myself, I don't think I'll ever play that well. Everybody has an understanding of where they are, and if you work really hard, what you can do and what you can't do and what you might achieve. And I was thinking, I'm not sure. I don't know if there's any amount of effort I could put in that would ever let me do that. And
Yeah.
it was simultaneously inspiring and depressing and all those things. But I do remember I left that concert at 10 o'clock at night and went to the building at Curtis and practiced until they kicked me out, because it was like, you're just inspired to go back to the woodshed and try to figure something out. So you're like, what just happened in that song
Yes.
that I heard? Like I didn't know, like you said, that idea of, you think the bar is here and then someone takes it and just pushes it up another 10 feet and you go, oh no, it's like a whole other thing. And then the last story I'll tell on this, and it's also about Mitsan, because he's just such a elevational musician. Of course, as you go through your training, you get better and better and better, and you're starting to advance at auditions and do really well. And I remember working on the Baird Three Pieces excerpt, which is another really difficult one for us. It covers all of the range and crazy rhythms and all of these tempo changes, and it's difficult for anybody. At any rate, I had brought this excerpt to a level that I felt really, really good about. And I was thinking to myself, all right, one of my internal goals had always been, I'm going to go to a lesson and I'm going to play, and my teacher's not going to be able to say anything.
That's awesome.
That was always my goal. It's like, I love my teachers, but I wanted to create silence. It's like, that's how I'll know I've done it. When you play and they're like, yeah, good. That's what was going to make me happy. So I had worked on this and brought it to a level. It's like, I'm going to do this. And so my colleague or classmate, Dave Murray, who's now in National Symphony, he was one of my classmates at the time. He's like, hey, you mind if I come to your lesson? I was like, yeah, come to my lesson. In fact, I was thinking internally, this is the perfect lesson for you to come to, because I'm about to show out. Basically the hardest thing that's written for the instrument, I'm going to nail it. And so Mitsan shows up to this lesson, and we talk a little bit. How's it going? How was your break? Because I think this is right after Christmas break or something like that. Good. So what are you going to play? I'm going to play Baird Three Pieces. Cool. And he's like, I hope you don't mind. I didn't bring my horn today. I just brought my mouthpiece, put it in my pocket, whatever. Fine. Okay, cool. So I played, and it went, by my own standards, great.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, that's good. That's good. I might do this spot differently or maybe that, but in general, it was really good. Can I just use your horn real quick? I brought my mouthpiece, so I haven't played yet, but let me see. And he doodles a couple of notes, and then he plays, and it's just at a level that's 10 times higher than the level I was playing it. And it was so deflating. I'm like, oh man, yeah, I guess what you think is good is not. You got a little ways to go. So that was part of the experience.
I love that. I love it. It's so fabulous, and we're in a way we're so lucky. Like, how cool to have a never-ending journey in a way. Like, if you can enjoy the fact that you never get to that horrible ending place where someone says, "Well, I guess you're done here. I guess that's all there is for you." You don't ever get that. It's always you hear something else, you see something else, and it's like, "Oh my God, there's more. It's better. There's more." It's so hard and so glorious all at once. And those experiences, especially as a student, when you're like, oh yeah, all right, I'm getting it now. And then they just play and you're like, this is insane. How can you even do that? How can we get there?
That was a really pivotal moment for me, looking back on it in time, because I started thinking to myself, and I think that about myself now as a teacher. It's like, I don't ever want to be in a position where someone can not warm up, pull their mouthpiece out of their pocket, and play something better than I played it when I spent a month preparing it. That should never, ever happen. Well, it just came clear to me. It's like, if I want to do this at that level, that can't be happening.
Right.
Right. So
I need to bump this up.
So that became my new challenge. And, thankfully, somewhere down the path, I remember in my last few months of school, we got to the point where Nitan stopped bringing his horn and his mouthpiece to all of my lessons, because he said, it sounds really, really good, and you're going to get this, and I can't play this stuff better than you can play it. And I started feeling better about it. And we would go through a list of excerpts preparing for the Met audition, or the previous audition before that was Seattle. And for a lot of things I would play, and he would go, yeah, that's good. That's good. That's a winner. That's a winner.
Nailed it.
And I would double check. I'd say, like, I'm serious. You would vote for this?
Yeah.
Like that's my standards. Like, I don't want to hear it's pretty good or I kind of like it, but this, like, if this were the moment, would you vote for that?
Right.
And once we started getting a lot of yeses, then I was fine with it. And I try to tell my students that now too, especially my higher level students, said, you should never be in a position where you're playing a piece in a lesson that I probably haven't practiced in years, and I can just pick it
Right.
up and play it better than you. If that's
Yeah.
happening, you got work to do. So
Right.
that's
Right.
that's kind of our standard or our relationship in that way.
Yeah, it's a great litmus for it all. So tell us a little bit about your Met audition because I've enjoyed speaking with different colleagues of yours and in on their journeys. The rep is so incredibly different from the standard orchestral rep that when they get the list to take the Met audition, they're like, "Oh, I don't know any of this stuff," and it's a whole different journey. What's it like in your section? Are there crossovers? Was it all new?
There, there's some crossover. A lot of the biggest, most standard trombone excerpts come from the orchestral repertoire. Whether that's the Ride of the Valkyries is a big one, whether you're playing for a symphony orchestra or an opera, or the William Tell Overture, or the Hungarian March from Damnation of Faust. Those are ones that you'll see on basically every standard orchestra symphonic audition as well as opera audition. So there's a little bit of crossover. There's also a lot of things that are not crossovers. So all of those other excerpts from Valkyria or from Lohengrin, we play Introduction Act 3 of Lohengrin in symphonic auditions all the time as trombone players, but we don't play the other excerpts. We don't play the stuff from Act 1 or the stuff from the middle of Act 3 or the chorale
Right.
from Act 3, stuff like that. So all those things start showing up. Otello is a huge one for us. You don't see that on these other auditions. Cavalleria Rusticana, Wozzeck, stuff like this.
Mhm.
So in an excerpt packet of 30 or something like that, 30 excerpts that you have to prepare for the Met audition as a trombonist, there are probably 6 or 7 of them where you go, oh, I've seen this before and done this a million times. So that's fine.
Mhm.
But the remaining 23 or whatever it happens to be are ones that are brand new. But I viewed that, especially because I was 22 at the time, I viewed that as an advantage. Because if I thought about the top 25, 30 excerpts that everyone has to play, I was thinking, okay, no matter how experienced you are, most likely, when people get this list and they have to prepare Wozzeck and Cavalleria and Otello and whatever, all these different things, we're all kind of starting from square one on this one.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Everyone's
Whether you're 22 or you're 40, I bet a lot of people are looking at some of this stuff seriously for the first time. So let's see, given 3 months, who can climb this mountain? And I thought, okay, that's good because otherwise you're competing against people who have a lot more experience. People have gone on stage and played these excerpts in an audition situation 15 times, and you're only doing it for the second or third time. So
right.
in that way, it was good. It required different type of preparation that
Mhm.
I wasn't accustomed to. I remember one of the first things I did when I got the list was go to the Curtis Library and check out a bunch of DVDs and VHS at the time, videos of these operas and all the scores. So the coffee table in the living room of our apartment in Philly was just stacked with scores and VHS recordings and DVDs and my parts. And one of the first things I did is I just went through and I watched all of the operas just so I could have some context of what's going on, just completely
Yeah.
separate from the score. Just what is this thing? What is Wozzeck about? Okay, let's watch this and just kind of be involved in the music. Then go back and watch it with the score, and then go back and watch it in a more segmented fashion where you're isolating, this is my part, this is what's being said on stage, so that's kind of the context, this is what else is playing with me or whatever. Once you have that, after that I felt like I was able to approach it kind of in the same way I would approach anything else, which is starting at the most rudimentary third grade level of playing things almost absent of rhythm, one note at a time, or playing them at half tempo and slowly building them up. And from that point, the process is very similar to any other process.
Mhm.
So It's the short version.
Yeah,
What I did, yeah.
I love it because it's methodical, but you approached it from a macro version first and really, like, appreciated the atmosphere that you were in before you started attacking getting hangups or not hangups on certain aspects of the physical act of playing it. So
Right.
it's awesome because, like you're saying, if everyone's starting on a similar playing field, um, you can just do what you need to do to get your job accomplished. So was the actual audition process for you something different, having just done Seattle, and now the Met is behind the screen the whole way? What is your kind of peak performance, mental performance headspace since you were very young in the audition journey? How did you approach that day?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's not like I'd come to some defining way of approaching auditions by that point. I was
Right.
still very much in the evolution of trying to figure that thing out. So the Met audition was my fourth audition for a full-time job.
Hmm.
I had auditioned for Cincinnati Symphony a couple of years before that, and I had auditioned for Seattle twice because the person who got hired the first time declined, and then they did it again a year later or several months later, something like that. So the first time I took a real professional full-time audition was Cincinnati, and I advanced and I got into one of the later rounds, and I played the first excerpt in this huge hall that they had there, and I was so excited about how well it was going that I kind of got caught up in my own sound, hearing it reverberate off the walls, that I lost focus and folded a couple of notes. And also, my I wasn't very mentally tough at the time, so as soon as I folded a couple of notes, I then just folded the rest of the entire round. It was a total disaster. Yeah. So that was that one.
Yeah.
Um, just no mental strength to figure out my way how to do this, and no perspective of where I was and the need to play from start to finish. Just the mindset was wrong.
Yeah.
The next time I went to Seattle, I remember getting into one of the later rounds and going in to sign in and seeing all of these names of people on the list that I had so much respect for. You go in to sign in, you see the other people who got there 15 minutes before you, you're like, oh my goodness.
Yep.
So this is the competition. And I remember that making me very anxious.
Yeah.
Um, Not so much that I got up there and I folded in the performance. I actually played quite well, but my mindset was I'm going to have to play out of my mind and hope that some of these other people don't play their best, and then maybe I can be competitive.
Mhm.
There was this lack of self confidence that was necessary to present yourself. You're trying to present something that you hope they will like, and not something that this is what I do. So that was
Right.
that part of the journey. The next time I took Seattle, I remember feeling like this is hopefully my last year of school, and I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to win.
Mhm.
I started being successful enough that people around me were like, "You should win," you're definitely going to have a good chance at winning. And it became more about trying to satisfy the expectations of other people and putting a lot of pressure on myself to do this.
Mhm.
And even though I played well, I just think the mindset was not a successful mindset.
Mhm.
So, all right. So fast forward to the Met audition a few months after that, because I think Seattle was in February and the Met audition was in May. Um, I remember being just really, really well prepared. And despite that, I remember the first round playing great throughout the entire first round. And the last excerpt of the first round was Miraculous Mandarin. And the penultimate note of that excerpt, I just cracked in a way that was just horrible. I mean, it's like when you play a brass instrument, you're basically holding a cannon at all times. You're always a millisecond from all things going wrong.
Certain
And
death.
and that was the final sound that went into the room
Ugh.
in that first round, and it was just gut wrenching. It's like, oh no, like I just put together 7 or 8 really good minutes, and then right at the tail end, boom, that's the last impression. So I was pretty sure I was going to get cut, but then I advanced, and so I was like, okay. And then the second round, it was I kind of had I was putting pressure on myself again to do really, really well. And it was kind of a hit or miss round. It's like I played most of the stuff well, but there are a couple of things I'd take back. There was nothing as egregious as the first one.
Mhm.
And also the feedback you get is strange because the Met, when they do auditions, they do them in a rehearsal room as opposed to playing in a big hall. So that's a different thing. If you're
Mm.
accustomed to stepping on stage at Cincinnati Symphony Hall or Benaroya Hall in Seattle versus being in a rehearsal room, it's different. It's a
Yeah.
different acoustic, it's different vibe, the whole thing. Anyway, that round went okay, and I made enough mistakes or mistakes that I recognized that I was pretty convinced I
You're
wasn't
out.
moving on there either. And then I advanced again. So this was now advanced to the semifinals because at the Met, they only considered the finals once there's less than 5 people remaining. So I remember we went from whatever the big pool of people was down to 10, and then we played that round of 10, and the next day they had cut it to 5. And so they're like, we're gonna have a semifinal round, and then after that we'll have the final round. So I remember calling Nitsan that night when I knew I was going to be down to the last 5 and saying, he's like, how'd it go? What you play? How'd it go? What was the feedback or whatever? It's like I played these 10 excerpts. These 8 went pretty good. Had a couple mistakes in this one and that one. I'm kind of surprised that I made it. And he said, look, Weston, he said, the people at the Met who are listening to this audition, they're not stupid. They're not advancing
Yeah.
you because you suck. They must be advancing you because something is going right. Obviously, believe me. He's like, believe me, if you were doing a terrible job, they would have cut you. I promise you.
Yeah.
So he's like, something you're doing must be good. That just means that you can continue. And he's like, and look, man, it doesn't, I mean, it matters, but you're going to get a great job one day, no matter what. So just go do your thing and, whatever. It's something about that hit me. And I just realized how much pressure I'd been putting on myself previously.
Hmm.
And so the next day, we're having this semifinal round of 5. And I remember as opposed to thinking I have to go and play the absolute best I've ever played, or I need to avoid this mistake or avoid that mistake, whatever. I remember the last thing I said to myself before I walked out to go and play this round was, just do what you prepared. And if you win or if you lose, no matter what, when you get back on the train, you go back to Philadelphia, you're going to go to your apartment and the lights are going to come on and there's going to be food in the refrigerator. And that's a lot more than a whole lot of people in the world can say. So, this is not a life or death situation. And no matter what happens, you're very fortunate and very blessed to be where you are anyway. So just go play.
Yeah.
Just play. It's fine. I mean, sometimes I think we put this pressure on ourselves, like every audition is a life or death situation, and this is my only chance to make my career. And if I don't take full advantage of this opportunity, the whole world's going to come crashing down, or I'm going to be broke forever, or something like that. It's like, look, I mean, what I think is broke, or what a lot of people think is broke, is not broke. Like there are
Yeah.
people in the world who don't have running water or electricity, or have no idea where the next meal is coming from. It's like, just go play,
Let's
man.
play.
Just,
Yeah.
just just go play. And something about that was very liberating. And
Yeah.
I went out and I played a really great round. I mean, to the point I remember I was number 2 in that round out of 5 people. And as soon as I finished, I didn't know the audition was going to be over, which it turned out to be. They picked me out of the semifinal round. There was no final round.
Wow.
But I knew at that point, it's like, you know what? I have to be advancing to the next round. Like if there's a next round, which I assumed there was going to be, because I had no idea
Hmm.
that there was even the concept of ending an audition at the semifinals. It's like I'll be in the next round. So I was already in the mindset of what are we doing next? Because I had worked so hard in the preparation, and that was the one time I had delivered everything I prepared with
Hmm.
a very clear mindset, absence of nerves, because I think my mental frame was correct. And so I remember sitting there kind of in the waiting room thinking to myself, if someone else played better than that, God bless them, and they can
Yeah.
have it. But like,
Yeah.
I mean, of course it's possible. Of course there's people who can play better, but it's like, I'm not going to do much better than that. And I would, I would be, I would be surprised if they heard me play that way and are not even remotely interested in hearing more. So I was kind of mentally gearing myself up for them to come in and say like, these 2 or 3 or 4 people advance, let's go to the next round. But they came in and said that it was over. So that was that story.
Wow.
And it turned out, after having talked to some of my colleagues, that I'd basically gotten all the votes in all the rounds. So, which
Wow.
is also interesting to me because, um, those rounds where I thought I was
Wow.
really on the margins and I was really close to getting cut, I was getting tons of votes in those rounds. It wasn't close. Um, so,
That is
whatever.
so awesome. And you know what? I mean, this is something that people constantly say to students and say to people on their journey. But if you're just you and you just play the way you play and sound the way you sound, if, you know, people are gonna love you for what they are hearing, and, your story about Mandarin, that's so classic. You're told by people, "I made a mistake, I made this horrible gaffe, and I still won," and as a student going through, you're like, "There's no way. There's no way that's possible." But you were you, and you were performing at the way that you play and the sound that you have, and they loved it the whole time, and they probably were like, "Yes, 2, 2, 2, just give us 2." But, what an incredible mental journey that you have to go on as the person giving the music, and meanwhile, the whole panel's back there going, "We just want 2." Like,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's what we want. So, it's a fascinating, headspace for the player, and we spend so much time wondering, what do they want? Wondering if what I'm playing is how, listening to the recordings, trying to match their sound and, doing all this stuff. But you clearly have a very strong, like, center of your sound and your playing and what you want and what's, the prize for you. And that's an awesome story of like, yeah, it came through. Like they heard you.
I think it's like anything else, like when you're developing friendships,
Hmm.
people are attracted to authenticity.
Yeah.
People are
Yeah.
attracted to someone who is not trying to be someone else or not trying to put on a show, but just someone who is who they are and is comfortable with who they are. And in this case, that person who they are is also competent and qualified and can put all the notes or 99% of the notes in the right place, that type of thing. And I think there's a general understanding that most people come to where they can tell the difference between a really good musician who had a couple of little mistakes or something versus someone who has legitimate flaws in their playing.
Hmm.
If someone plays 10 excerpts and in general, their sense of rhythm and pitch and tone quality and understanding of how to play in the correct style is at a really, really high level, and then they chip a note, you can say that's a great player. If no one is going to look at LeBron James and because he misses a shot, say, "Oh, he's a bad basketball player because he missed a free throw." It's like, I
Exactly.
mean, look at the whole body of work here. I mean, come on,
Yeah.
versus versus someone
Exactly.
who doesn't miss any of the notes, but just in general, there's always this overriding question about their pitch or about their rhythm or about the vibrato seems to be not fitting of the style or whatever it happens to be. So, yeah, I think you're right. Sometimes we get focused on the wrong things.
Yeah, and it's hard when you want to be picked, you want to be liked, you want to be the one, and like you were saying, there's that fear of, especially in winds and brass, there's only so many positions, and once it's gone, it might be gone for your entire career.
Right.
So you get this fear factor of like, this is my only chance at Curtis or my
Right.
only chance at the Met, and if I don't win this, then that door is closed. So it's a fascinating journey. So as you transitioned from, such a young age, getting the gig and now a teacher, um, what kinds of things do you think about when you've got these students and you have people with different skills and different things that are natural for them? How do you try and help them through that exact experience? And you were tough on yourself, but you found a way through it, and you you got to the end of that solution a lot faster than a lot of people do, as far as your kind of peace and calm of like, I'm just going to present and that will be the end of it. That's a hard thing to come to. How do you help your students through that?
Well, you can kind of guide people through it and tell them your own story and help them have your story inform their own. But
Mhm.
everybody has to go through their own process. It's and there's no amount of conversation that you can have with someone that is going to allow them to just skip the steps. So I,
So
you know,
true.
it's Mike Tyson once said, there was somebody who was getting ready to fight Mike Tyson, and they were talking about the game plan they had made for fighting him, and how they were going to do this in the early rounds and that in the later rounds, and blah 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 blah. And Mike Tyson's response was, "Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face." You know, and so I'll tell students like, look, yeah, you're going to go to this audition. And this is the mindset that you want to achieve, and this is the way you want to think about this excerpt and that one, and these are the potholes, and these are things you got to focus on as preparing, et cetera, et cetera. But you know, I also tell them this is a process,
Mhm.
and I try to help them expedite some of the steps as much as they can.
Mhm.
Uh, but you are going to go through this thing. and you're going to get up there and be really prepared sometimes, and it's not going to work. And I think just alerting people to the fact that this is, in fact, the cost of doing business
Yeah.
at this level. That's the way it goes. You want to do this? Get prepared for the fact there's going to be some heartbreaks and some disappointments, and sometimes you're going to be really well prepared. You're not going to present as well as you prepared. Sometimes you're going to spend all of your money to fly across the country, take an audition. It's going to be over in 2 minutes or less. Like you have to have enough. You have to have enough thickness of skin to be willing to deal with that. And I think the thing that helps people is to manage their expectations. And that's not
Mhm.
to suggest that you should lower your expectations, but
Mhm.
just so that this is one of the potential outcomes. And
Yeah.
when that does happen, don't be supremely devastated by the fact that it happened. Chalk it up as a learning experience, be aware of what you can do, refine your process, come back to the table, let's see where we go. Because every person reacts to these different stimuli differently.
Mhm.
And, and that's a part of your entire life process. I grew up playing basketball from the time I was a kid, and I remember being one of the better players on my youth basketball teams. I'm just talking like little YMCA stuff, but
Mhm.
I remember multiple times being 7 years old, 6 years old, nine, whatever, being the person who is on the free throw line with 1 second left and we're down by one and you got to make two free throws. And something
Yeah.
about being a child and being accustomed to what it means to step up in a pressure moment, I'm sure has a relationship to what it means to be able
Totally.
to find calmness 13, 14, 15 years later when you're standing in the later rounds of an audition. And everybody has to have their own journey that leads them to be able to do that. So, you know, I share my experience, but I don't think there's any way to skip steps. And a lot of people, I remember early in my career, like, oh, you didn't have to go through this, you didn't have to go through that. You won this job when you were 22. And, there were a couple other smaller gigs that I won even when I was 20 or 21. And it's like, I didn't skip steps. I just put
Yeah.
a lot of hours in and went through a lot of experiences in a more compressed period of time. But it was like if you had been a fly on the wall to see my emotional ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs and the sheer number of hours that were being put in. I mean, I must have dedicated 8 or 9 hours every single day for probably 4 months straight to that Met audition. Not to say all those hours were on my face, but studying and listening
Mhm.
and recording myself and listening back to those recordings and taking notes. It's like, and if you do that for several, that's a lot of hours,
Yeah. That's
you
a
know?
lot of work.
It's a lot. No one would say like, oh, you just,
Got
you got
lucky on that
lucky
one.
when you were young and you just got to skip the process. It's like, no, the process was compressed. It's like
Yeah.
taking a crash course.
Exactly, exactly, and you're right, and you did like the journey is gonna be there no matter how long it takes you. Some people draw it out, some people squish it all in, but
That's
you
right.
can it's just like the free throws, and I feel like that comes up a lot. There's a mental strength that is required for the job, and my next question was gonna be for you about that first rehearsal and first concert, because that's also mental strength. You can win the job, but then you have to do the job, and you get to sit in the pit and be with these incredible colleagues, and now it's really time to play. What was your first rotation like?
It was it was a learning experience in so many different ways. In a lot of ways, I felt like Curtis prepared me really, really well for what the job was going to be. Like Curtis is very much a learn by doing school.
Mhm.
So when I sat in the orchestra, I didn't feel like I was a fish out of water. There wasn't this feeling of what are we doing now. In fact, I remember the first thing we rehearsed that year in preseason at the Mets. We have 3 weeks of rehearsal before the performance actually starts. Was Brahms one, if I remember correctly,
Oh.
because that was supposed to be one of our orchestra concerts that year. And it's like, oh, I've done this before. I've
Mhm.
played this piece, and I've played this piece with a big conductor because Curtis got lots of big name conductors to come. So it's like the idea of having a household name conductor and playing a standard piece of repertoire with a good orchestra, having heard a great orchestra play. It's like I know what this is.
Right.
In fact, actually, I thought the more difficult part of acclimating to the job was the group dynamics and interpersonal relationships when you're a section and you're 13 years junior to the next youngest
Yeah.
person and probably 20 or 30 years removed from the next person after that. And you're coming in as someone who's on fire and has been practicing 4 hours a day for years on end, and you study the score note upside down and backwards. And granted, the level of the orchestra as a whole is just through the roof, and it's high and it's amazing, but there are different people. Everyone is approaching this thing from a different place,
Mm-hmm.
and you're approaching the job with an enthusiasm that is nearly impossible for people who've been doing the job for 25 years to approach it with.
Right.
And you're also approaching it through the lens of someone who's 22 and not through the lens of someone who is 58. And all of those things create a certain amount of like tensions and disconnects.
Yeah.
Also, you're joining the orchestra as one of only two or three African Americans in the orchestra and the youngest person in the orchestra, and someone who has been told from the beginning of your life that it's okay to be your most authentic self and say who you are and things like that. And all of those things that we understand about racial dynamics,
Mm-hmm.
they all come to the fore.
Yeah.
Even if people don't understand, especially back in 2005, exactly how to label those dynamics. I mean, now I think the national conversation on that has evolved to a point that people are beginning to have some shared language,
Yeah.
and even my own understanding of the language that's necessary to describe what those feelings are and what these biases are, and is much, much more elevated now than it was then. But
Mm-hmm.
there were a whole bunch of factors that were intersecting there that were affecting my experience in the orchestra, separate from just the quality of the music. The quality of
Right.
music was through the roof. I mean, I remember the opening night we did like a opening night season sampler that included Samson, Delilah, Marriage Figaro, and Tosca,
Wow.
and it was unbelievable. And it was just the level was crazy. And I remember that playing Act Two of Tosca, playing Act Three of Samson, Delilah, and just and then even looking forward, I think later that season we played Valkyria, and the opening of Act One of Valkyria, with the basses, it's just those moments take you to a different place, and you can never get them back.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I try to tell students this when you're a student, this like the first time it's like, oh, we're playing Mahler 5 in our orchestra concert or something like that, or whatever some big piece is that you've always dreamed of playing.
Mm-hmm.
I try to encourage students to digest that in the right way,
Mm-hmm.
because as great as these pieces are, and they are great, it's only the first time.
Right. So
Like it's
true.
it's only the first time. And I've experienced that so much, and it takes something truly special to make something that really great feel like the first time again.
Yes.
It's almost impossible to achieve,
You're so
and
right.
that's the case with so many numbers of things. I mean, I know that the introduction to Act One of Valkyrie is one of the all time great moments in music, but there's no recording that I can listen to that can recreate the feeling that I had of feeling what that was like in the orchestra the first time I did it, or the first time you finished playing the ring cycle, or the first time you played Parsifal. No, you'll never get that moment back. So do it and appreciate it the first time.
That's awesome.
An analogous thing is I love to travel. Sorry, I know I'm like veering to the left here,
No,
but
I like it.
I love to travel, and I remember going to Barcelona and walking into Sagrada Familia. I don't know if you've ever been there before, but
Yep. Never
yeah,
played.
yeah. It's just you have this moment when you walk in. It's just like the skies open. You go like, "Oh my god!" Like wow, wow. Like people can do this. That is
Yeah.
amazing, and it takes you away. And I remember leaving and thinking that was just the most incredible man-made structure I've ever seen in my entire life. And I thought, wow, this would be really cool to bring my girlfriend to see, who's now my wife. But so the next time I went on a European vacation, I said we have to stop through Barcelona because you have to see this thing. It's just crazy, this Gaudi
Mhm.
structure. And so we walk in, and for me, that level of magic, I could still appreciate how great it was,
Mhm.
but the magic for me was gone. But when I looked at Sarah, I could see the magic on her face. She was like,
Yeah.
"Whoa!" And I was able to appreciate it through that lens. It's like I
Yes.
remember that feeling, and that's just something I hope everyone will recognize as they get the opportunity to go through this repertoire or have these special experiences, to recognize what they are in real time, and also to recognize that any time could be the last time.
Hmm.
I've thought about that a lot now, especially in the COVID era, and also as my career has expanded and taken on new legs in different ways, administratively and with thought leadership. Now that the Met has been not playing since March and not getting paid and all these things that are pretty public at this point in time, I've considered to myself, it's probably not the case, but it may be the case
Hmm.
that I played Bohem for the last time. Or that when I played
Right.
Manuel Lescaut in rehearsal back on March 11th or whatever it was, that was the last time I was ever going to play that piece of music. I wasn't thinking that at the moment in time when I was in that rehearsal, but it occurred to me, if I had known during that rehearsal, or if I had known during those last performances in February and March, that those potentially be the last times I would ever play those pieces, how would I have approached it then? And I know for sure it would have been different.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I hope that it's not. I don't think it will be, but it's occurred to me that it's a possibility.
Hmm.
What type of seriousness? Not necessarily seriousness, because I mean I always take my job seriously, but to what degree would I have approached it differently? From a mental standpoint, because once you've played Bohème 100 times or Traviata 100 times or 200 times or whatever it is, at a certain point you can allow yourself to disconnect from the magic of that piece, because you think, we'll do it again. We'll do it again.
Right.
We'll be back next week. We'll be back on Friday. But what if you weren't?
Yes, and you know what? I think that's, like, the ultimate lesson in presence, and that's something that I feel like as modern people, we struggle with immensely, being able to stop the 900 things that we're all doing and the 15 jobs we all have, and actually be present in that moment, and music requires a lot of that of you, but like you're saying, the first time you do it, you are the most present. It is all encompassing. Your whole self is in that moment because there's question marks still. There's things around the corner you might not know, even if you studied. But
Right.
the 50th or the 100th time you've done it, you're pretty sure you're confident you got it. And that's a different kind of level of intense presence. And you're right, for anybody, it could be your last, and there is nothing quite like the first.
Right.
Um, and it's magical. And I think that part of the journey, like you were saying, with colleagues who have done it so many times, it's very easy, I'm sure, after 20 or 30 years to have that kind of drift off. But how amazing if you can find a way to hang on to the feeling, like you said, the feeling of watching someone else have it. Just keep the feeling, because that is kind of the magic of it all in the first place.
Yeah, because you show up, that first year talking about what's it like at the very beginning. And when you show up, especially in a place like the Met, because when you're in conservatory, oftentimes, even if you want to be an orchestral musician, you're learning Brahms and Beethoven and Schubert and Schumann and stuff like that. You're not learning Puccini and Verdi and Wagner to that extent.
Mhm.
And so there's this element of almost everything you play those first handful of seasons has that magic, because everything is new. It's not like, oh, now I actually get to play Beethoven 5 at a higher level. It's
Right.
it's not that. It's like, oh, we're doing De Frau and a shot. I don't really know that piece. Let me learn this. Oh, wow, that's incredible. Or some more obscure Verdi opera, or even though it's a very standard Verdi opera. Even if you're playing Aida, you might know some of the greatest hits in the Triumphal March, but you don't know the inner workings of every other act.
Right.
And so there's all this magic, and for other people, a lot of times that degree of magic has been lowered.
Mhm.
And so trying to reconnect with that as much as you can is really, really important, I think, for the longevity of a career. And I remember, I think one of my best friends had told me that it was something that was relayed to him by Dick Woodhams, former principal of the Philadelphia Orchestra, who basically said it's really important to remember some of the moments when you fell in love with music. And if you can recall what those moments are, the moments when you're having the most fun, before music became not all fun and games. If you can
Mhm.
remember what that's like, then you can retain your joy and your love for the craft for a really, really long time. And so at those moments when I would get dark and jaded, like we all have, momentary lapses where we do that, I would look back to a time when I was in high school and we were playing Guys and Dolls as the high school musical that year, which has really fun trombone parts, and there's a couple of solos, and me and Tim Higgins would trade them off on given nights. Say, okay, tonight you get to play all the solos, and tomorrow night I get to play them. It was just a blast. We're just having fun. And that's back before you had any concerns about getting a job or having a bad review in the New York Times or not getting
Right.
tenure or any of this other stuff, or whatever. It's just
Yeah.
like, just play because you love to play. And when I think back on those times, and then I think about what I have the privilege to do now, it frames things in a way that almost immediately reignites my joy.
I love it. That's awesome. That's awesome. I just would love to touch for a moment on your new adventure, um, administration, leadership. There's so much to that. But from this experience chatting with you, I'm really excited for the prep division of Juilliard because I feel like you're the perfect person with the perfect kind of energy to do amazing things. What if there wasn't rules and all the craziness that there is and challenges that there are with real administration, do you have a dream for the prep division? Do you have a vision for what you'd love to see? Something that would make you so excited?
I have lots of dreams.
Yeah.
So, the preparatory division at Juilliard is two programs. It's the Juilliard Pre-College and the Music Advancement Program. And the pre-college is over 300 students. It's a global program. Kids from ages 8 through 18 come from all over the world. And the Music Advancement Program is a program that's dedicated to underrepresented students in classical music that are from the tri-state area, and students are also underserved in classical music. So the financial structure and what students, the cost of the program is different. But students in both of these programs are getting something very similar to a full conservatory curriculum every Saturday for
Cool.
30 weeks. So any Saturday, these students come in, or right now log on, or a mix actually. They're getting private lessons. They're participating in chamber music. They're taking music theory and ear training lessons. They're getting large ensemble. They're participating in chorus. They get musical electives, things like that. So
Mhm.
it's a really full experience for them. Um,
It's awesome.
as far as as far as my dreams, of course, one of my dreams is that we keep the level very, very high and that we
Mhm.
continue to push it higher and higher.
Mhm.
Pre-college is a place where we have alums like Perlman and Yo-Yo Ma and Manny Axe. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's an insane thing. So it's not even so much like, can we do better than that? It's like, can we continue to achieve at that artistic level? Uh,
Yeah.
and from a different standpoint, I think the dream is that our program continues to evolve to be more inclusive, more
Mhm.
diverse, that we're representing a lot of different voices, and that's representation across the board. That's in who attends the program. It's the who, the what, and the why.
Yeah.
Who's in the program? What music are we playing? Who's administering the program? What is the mission of what we're doing? Are we present in our community? For a program like the Music Advancement Program, when you look across the tri-state area, does every kid who's underrepresented and plays an instrument, do they view the Music Advancement Program as their desired destination?
Yeah.
Is this the place where they all want to be? And that's a combination of, are we making ourselves present enough that they know that we're here, and
Mhm.
also are we putting together a program that makes them all want to be here and makes their parents feel comfortable sending them there.
Mhm.
I mean, if I'm an African American parent from the Bronx, do I want my kid to be at Juilliard?
Right.
Do I want them to be not, and that has nothing to do with the level of playing or anything like that.
Right.
The artistic level at Juilliard is through the roof, as it should be. I mean, it's Juilliard for a reason,
Yeah.
because it is.
Yeah.
But if I'm from you know a less privileged community, and I understand all the different racial dynamics that have affected our country, do I feel comfortable putting my child in that space? And so the
Right.
question I ask myself every day is how do we make sure that the program that we're creating is something where people from all different walks of life can come in and say, yeah, I belong here. This is a place where I'm good. I can be my most authentic self. there's something in the program that has something to do with who I am and what I'm about and my culture. And it also provides an opportunity for me to see into the lives of all these other cool people from different walks of life in a way that is organic and fun for me.
Yeah.
So we've been making a lot of efforts to make that be the case. And actually, as difficult as COVID has been, it has created some silver linings that make it more possible to do some of that work more quickly. So
That's awesome.
I'll give you a quick example. Of course, we've been having to run some orchestra classes remotely where students are
Hmm.
logging in because they're doing work from home. And in a way to keep them engaged, we've been bringing different guest artists and speakers to come and speak to our kids. And so this 7-week block, we had yesterday for our math students, we had Stephanie Matthews, who's amazing violinist and entrepreneur, and is doing contracting for everybody from Beyonce and Jay-Z and Pharrell, and contracting for major LA film studios. You know, music videos, things like that, talk to our students about
So
what is it
cool.
like to shape a career trajectory that looks like that, and we played videos from Beyonce singing at the Kobe Bryant Memorial, to behind the scenes with Terrence Blanchard and Spike Lee for Da 5 Bloods, to a music video from something else, to Lizzo opening at the Grammys. And I know that a lot of our kids will look at that and go like, oh, that's really cool. I see that. A couple weeks before that, we had Gareth Luba, who's one of my friends, who's a violist in Germany, introducing our students to overtone singing. And
Cool.
what does that mean? What is that
Yeah.
all about? How does that apply to everyday ear training? In a couple of weeks, we have Chi-Chi Nwanoku coming from, who founded Shineke, to talk about how does social justice intersect with your music? What's it like to create your own orchestra and to push the narrative forward? Also, our students in MAP are working with historical performance, and they're getting a chance to play on Baroque bows and instruments. So just making sure that the experience is broad enough for them that they're constantly engaged and having fun, also at the absolute highest level. They get a chance to see what the world is about. I want
Yeah.
I want it to be. I tell our students, music is fun, but it's not all fun and games. And I want you to come and enjoy yourself and be challenged. I tell our parents at the beginning of every year, there's going to be some times when your kids are going to come home and they're not going to be happy with us, and that's going to be because we believe in their potential, that they can be the absolute greatest. The idea that your child is the next Jesse Norman or Yo-Yo Ma or Wynton Marsalis creates no cognitive dissonance for me. But I also recognize that a certain amount of pressure and expectations is required to create those diamonds, and
Yeah.
so we love your kids, but we're going to push them. So just so you know, when they come home and they say, they're making me do this or making me do that, or your training is hard, or it's like, it's all good. It's all for a good purpose. And so for that, we're able to get a lot of good buy-in. And,
That's
all
awesome.
things considered, it's my now year and a half, coming up on 2 years of work at Juilliard, has been extraordinarily fulfilling and challenging, but fun, and it's moving in a great direction. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I'm really excited for you. It gives you the opportunity to lead something that's super true to your real self and your energy and your enthusiasm. It's allowing you to have a place to put it that you're seeing, the results from it. And these kids are going to be very grateful for you. And from all the things we've talked about, how amazing to give the opportunity to people to have the kinds of feelings and emotions that we have had throughout your time in music and career that are so important to being a human. And a lot of times people just don't have the chance to even give it a try, let alone excel at it. So I'm very excited to see what is to come in the future.
Me too.
Thank you so much for this. This has been so much fun. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, it was great to do it.
Thank you for joining us on Inside the Notes. Be sure to visit InsideTheNotes.com for additional content from our artists and guests, and click subscribe to stay up to date on future interviews. Until next time, this is your host, Erica Block.